The Bible is a living word that reads us as we read it. It's a person, a voice that proves that time is not linear, as one sentence can confirm the past, guide the present, and declare the future. You are here. I am here. He is here. We are here. Right now. In the tomorrow of yesterday and in the yesterday of tomorrow. I thank you for joining today. So we're back. Thank you so much for joining once again. In our last episode, David received the shattering news that both Saul and Jonathan were casualties of a battle against the Philistines. Saul, the former king who spent his latter years tormented by an evil spirit that drove him to chase and hunt David. Jonathan, David's best friend, his ace, a man that he loved deeply like the covenant brother that he was. Jonathan was a man who believed in David and forced him to remember the oil of God when times got tough. And in the wake of this news, in the wake of Saul's death, it is now time for David to take the throne. I imagine that there's no one who David would have rather celebrated with than his best friend, Jonathan. David wept. He mourned. He honored the legacy of both Saul and Jonathan. And then David sought the Lord for direction. Do I stay here in Ziklag? Where do I go? What now, Lord? Do I move back to Judah? Yes. Okay, which town? Hebron. The Lord was very clear and very direct as to what David was meant to do next. So David packed up all of his things, and he and his family, as well as his men and their families, all moved to Hebron of Judah. So the men of Judah, when they found out that David moved back, they all gathered and they crowned David to be the king over the people of Judah. Mind you, it has been over a decade since the oil of Samuel's horn crept down David's forehead and the Lord anointed David to be king. Could you imagine waiting over a decade to finally step into what the Lord promised you? Well, here we see David not only had to guard and protect himself from the dangers of the enemy who was against him, who was against his calling, who was against his anointing. David also had to face impatience, doubt, worries, concern, unbelief. Did God really call me to do this? Did God really anoint me to be king? And if so, when and how is it ever going to happen? David, over a decade later, is sitting on the throne, king of the people of Judah. Meanwhile, Abner, the guy who was the commander of Saul's army, took one of Saul's surviving sons, Ishbosheth, and crowned him king over Israel. Now hold up. We already have a king, David, right? Absolutely. But here we are seeing that there is a split in the kingdom. Now, we're going to do a quick-ish recap. The Lord called Abram, renamed him Abraham, promised him a countless number of descendants, promised that he would give him the land of the Canaanites. Fast forward, the Israelites were held captive for over 4 centuries in Egypt. The Lord called Moses to go and rescue his people from oppression and lead them to the land that the Lord promised them. Moses, following the leadership of the Lord, leads the people of Israel right to the land that the Lord promised them, the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Girgashites, Jebusites, all these ites. Right? Moses was not granted entry into the promised land, but he led them to it. Joshua, however, led them into the promised land where the Israelites fought for the land that the Lord promised them. And after they fought for the land that the Lord promised them, they allotted different regions of this land to different tribes of Israel. Because remember, Israel was actually a man. His name was Jacob. He was renamed Israel. He had 12 sons. Each of his sons represented one of the tribes of Israel. All of them were allotted different regions of this land that was promised them. So imagine with me, if you will, there's a river. This river is called the Jordan River. When the people of Israel were journeying through the wilderness, they made it to this Jordan River. And on the west side of the Jordan River is where the promised land was. On the east side of the Jordan River, before they ever even crossed, the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh decided that they wanted to stay on the east side of the Jordan River. They're like, yo, this is nice. We're good over here. We don't even have to cross. We don't need to do all that fighting. We'll settle over here. Moses made it very clear, yo, y'all can stay here, but you will be going to fight with your brothers. Reuben, Gad, half the tribe of Manasseh are on the east side of the Jordan River. The rest of the tribes crossed the Jordan River. Then the tribes of Judah and Simeon took the southern part of the land. A little north of them, you have the tribes of Dan, Ephraim, and Benjamin. North of them, you have West Manasseh, because remember, the other half of Manasseh is on the east side of the Jordan. And then north of them, in the north, like north, you have the tribes of Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali. I said all of that to say all of this land was promised to the tribes of Israel collectively. Now there's loyalty divided between the southern part, which is the tribes of Judah and Simeon, and the northern parts, which is all of the other tribes. That would be Dan, Ephraim, Benjamin, West Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali. All of them were under the leadership of this new king, Ishbosheth. Judah and Simeon, they're all rocking David's jersey. They're like, yo, we believe that you belong. We've seen you at work. You've been leading. You're a warrior. We're good. We'll rock with you. Now, what gave Abner the authority even to crown Ishbosheth as king? Customarily, the oldest son of the king would be the successor of the throne. So because Saul was the king of Israel, there was a whole group of people who believed that they needed to go with what was traditional and just make him the successor of the throne, because essentially the crown was a direct inheritance. Herein lies the problem. In 1 Samuel 15:28, Samuel addressed the hard-headed King Saul, and he told him that the Lord had torn the kingdom of Israel from him and given it to someone better than him. The Lord gave David the kingdom of Israel as a whole, not just Judah. So, needless to say, tensions began to flare between those who were loyal to Saul and those who were loyal to David. Because remember, it's common for kings to want to expand their kingdom. They want to expand the territory and citizenry. So one day, Abner, who led Ishbosheth's troops, and Joab, who was David's nephew and right-hand man, led David's troop to a place in Gibeon where they had a face-off. Now, the face-off was an epic fail. We won't even go into the details about that. But ultimately, a full-on battle ensued. Abner's men got whooped by Joab and his men. Now, remember, when David was on the run from Saul, there were hundreds of men that ended up gravitating to the leadership of David. Now, these men were warriors. You can read more about that in Chronicles, but these men were not to be played with. They knew their way around the battlefield. They knew their way around weapons. They knew how to fight. There were some of these men, it said that one of them could take hundreds or even thousands. These men, they were mighty. They were strong. It is no surprise that they ended up whooping Abner and his troops. Joab and his men won the battle, a great victory. However, that was not enough for Joab's little brother, Asahel. Now, I mentioned that Joab is David's nephew, but they were a trio. Joab, Abishai, and Asahel were all sons of David's sister, Zeruiah. And so these three used to run together on the battlefield. Joab, we've heard about him already, and we'll hear a lot more about him. We will also hear about the mighty exploits of Abishai, but here we are going to spotlight the younger brother, Asahel. Now, this man had some speed. He was flash of ancient days, okay? The man could run. He was very fast. He was zealous, and he was tired of the games. Asahel knew that Abner had a lot of influence and a lot of pull with the people of Israel. So Asahel knew that eliminating Abner would be a strategic move in the direction of unifying these split and divided kingdoms, but under the rulership of David. So while Abner and his men are retreating because, again, they just got whooped, Asahel ran after Abner. He ran and he ran. He was locked on taking out Abner. That was his one focus, one desire, one objective, one goal at this time was to catch up with Abner to take him out. Abner was an old head who had been around the block a few times. And he warned Asahel, listen, young buck, this is not what you want. Go on about your business. Go find somebody in your own weight class, man. Asahel just kept chasing him. Stop, boy. I don't want to have to take you out because then I'll have to deal with your brother Joab, man. Just chill. Asahel wasn't hearing it, just kept chasing him. And he was gaining on Abner. That is, until Abner's spear stopped him dead in his tracks. Like, literally. Joab and Abishai found out what happened and they went after Abner with a goal to avenge their brother's death. They didn't care how exhausted they were. They didn't care how late it had gotten. They didn't care how far they had to go. They were going to avenge Asahel. Abner eventually called out to Joab. He's like, come on, man. Can't we all just get along? I didn't want to have to do it. I tried to tell him to chill out, man. Like, but we're all one body, bro. Why we gotta keep shedding each other's blood? That night, Joab, I'm sure, under the influence of some exhaustion, decided to call a truce. Joab and Abishai took Asahel home to Bethlehem and buried the little brother. But you better believe that they did not forget. That was the beginning of a very long war between those that were loyal to Saul and those that were loyal to David. David, who was backed by God, grew stronger and stronger. Whereas Ishbosheth in the house of Saul, on the other hand, grew weaker and weaker. Ishbosheth's kingdom was basically held together by the influence of Abner, who was very loyal to the house of Saul. However, some loyalty dies. And we'll talk more about what happens when loyalty is pushed to the limit in our next episode, if the Lord blesses me to record another one. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you for your time. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. I look forward to chatting with you again next time. Until then, bye for now.